Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about all the racing last week and preview next week. Joining me in the studio, I have Richard Youden and Luis Torres. Fellas, how we doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good.
All right. So before we get into the racing, we are grieving here a little bit at Drafting the Circuits. We've lost one of our own, but I'm just going to throw this whole thing to Richard and let him break that news to you, and then I'll chime in a bit. Richard, all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Yeah, I mean, so often every week we come on this show and we talk about something that we're all passionate about, you know, our racing and all the series, you know, around the world, and you know, unfortunately, at times, you know, you have some, you know, these events can take the lives of some drivers, you know, doing what they love, and we touch on that, and other times we have to touch on drivers, you know, that are from a bygone era, from, you know, when I was growing up or Frank was growing up, and we touch on their memory. But as Frank mentioned, yeah, we lost one of our own this last week, Gray Warren. For those of you listening that remember Gray, you know, one of the sort of cornerstones of the show for a number of years. Unfortunately, hasn't been with us, you know, battling some health issues for the last 2 years, and unfortunately, early this week, a day after his 65th birthday, he succumbed to cancer, which was a real shame. I first met Gray when I started at Richard Childress Racing back in early 2015. I was this wide-eyed kid sort of thing who'd just moved over from Formula One teams in England, and you know, there was a fair bit of you know, trepidation on my part about the move, and you know, there was a bit of kickback from some of the guys that I was working with. You know, what's this, you know, kid coming over from, to quote Talladega Nights, Formula One. And you know, it was very much similar to that for those of you that know the movie. But Gray was cut from a different cloth to most of the guys that we were working with. He all he cared about was racing, and he was fascinated by my stories and experiences in Europe, and as I was fascinated by his stories and experiences in NASCAR. And it really, you know, talking to him and sharing those experiences really helped me get an understanding of what the sport was all about. And he was one of those guys that was you know, a real racer at heart, and dedicated to doing the job he loved. Prior to being at RCR, he'd been at Bill Davis Racing for a long time, which I think is probably where he made his name. But you name it, Gray had done you know, what anything you could ever imagine in the sport. And when I got to know him, he was running the parts department and the at RCR, and I dread to think the number of times when he bailed me out trying to, you know, managing to scrounge a sort of next day delivery on a part for something that I needed to get to the track or whatever it was. But you know, he would always come through for you, and he was he was a great guy. And unfortunately, we both were subject to the cuts at RCR around about the same time, and you know, we went separate ways. But through this show, you know, we kept in contact, and you know, I sort of became regular on here with Gray and Frank and Seth, and Luis. You sort of did a couple of shows with Gray there before he had to you know, take a back step.
As a matter of fact, it was Gray that invited you to the show. I still remember.
Yes.
He goes.
Yep.
I've met the most amazing guy. He's from England. He's worked in Formula One. Let's get him on as a guest.
Yeah.
You know, so Gray brought you into this.
He did. Yeah.
little fall
And
with
that
us.
show. Yeah, we were just talking about, that show was when this was originally done live back in, that must have been 5 years ago now at least.
Easily,
with a vastly different panel, but it was a live show, and I was like, remember my wife was listening to it in the other room while I was on in the bedroom, recording it with you guys, and and his enthusiasm and depth of knowledge for the sport, and he was a sportsman as well, not just racing. He did a lot of local sport in the North Carolina area, a lot of high school basketball, and all of that sort of side of things. So he was extremely well known in the area and very, very highly respected. And for a long time, I think we'd all hoped that he would have been able to be in a position to come back on the show. But I think from unfortunately some of the social media posts that him and his family have been putting out over the last few months, it would it's pretty obvious that that was never going to happen. But it's a great loss. We really have. He was a really, really good guy, and he'd do anything, for anybody to help anybody out. And he was one of those guys that really helped me, make that transition to come and work here. And you can't put a price on that when people do. And I've as much as possible tried to learn from that and help other people coming over. I know a couple of guys that are moving over here from the UK in the next few months, and I want to try and carry on some of that support that Gray was able to give me, because I certainly wouldn't have been as comparatively successful doing what I was doing without the support of guys like Gray. He was very, very special, and Guy, he'll be seriously missed. He really will.
Yeah, I mean, like when it comes to the show, when I first joined the show, they had the established panel of Candace, Ronnie, and Gray. They had Michelle Rahal, who was doing open wheel. I was invited to come on and do an open wheel segment every week, but pretty much my role was to do my little IndyCar news and then shut up the rest of the show. But I me, I like to contribute, and I would try to chime in here and there, and then it was they said, maybe you should just do your IndyCar piece and hang up. But it was Gray that encouraged me to contribute and be a part of the show. And then when those other folks left the show, it was me and Gray, and then we had brought on you, Richard. We had Joey Bars and Chris,
Seth was in there.
Seth was in there. Yeah, we had the rotating panels, but Gray was there, and then somehow hosting the show fell into my lap. I didn't know if I could do that, but Gray knew I could do it, and he was when we used to do the show, I always introduced Gray as my right hand man. I said, welcome to Driver Circus. Got my right hand man Gray Warren with me, and he was right there. And if I stumbled on the air, if I misspoke or got a name wrong or a date wrong or a race winner wrong, he was right there to correct me, but never to make me look foolish. Right? We worked well together as a team. Again, Richard, he brought you into the show, and you and I have developed a great friendship from there as well. So, just to look through, Gray's social media and see how many people that really loved and respected him. It's, it sounds cliche to say, oh, he was a great man, but he was a great man. But at the end of the day, for me, he was my friend.
Yep.
And that's all that counts for me. So we miss you, Gray.
Yeah.
We miss you, Gray.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, totally.
I know. Yeah, it's now this one hurt.
Oh yeah.
Because I always hoped he'd come back on the show.
Yep.
He'd text me every now and again and ask how things were going, but it just never felt well enough to get back on. But so and now Louise, you got to talk to Gray a couple times. So and I know that you enjoyed his take as well. So I'll give you a few moments to say your goodbyes and tributes to Gray before we go ahead and talk about the week in racing.
Yeah, as I was only there for a couple of times in 2018 when I used to talk through my phone and earbuds, which wasn't the greatest thing to do. So that's why I didn't came into the fray until late throughout last year. But yeah, he was the couple times that I was on a noble guy and respectable and all that stuff. Of course, how I found out about it was through Tommy Baldwin's Facebook page of what happened, where I learned a little bit more that
Mm-hmm.
he was involved with Bill Davis Racing, especially the time when Ward Burden was driving for that team. So he's able, and within the time he was there, he's accomplished a lot in his role for sure. And
Oh,
and it kind of it's one of those unfortunate things where a guy in that community in that time period when I just started watching in 03. I didn't start watching NASCAR till that year, the year after Ward won the 500. So it's always it's one of those things that is sad to see somebody from an era that's kind of viewed as a bygone era lose
yeah.
their life as something like that. And so he'll be for sure sorely missed.
But just very quickly, I know we want to move on, and Gray wouldn't want it any other way. But you hate it. We get to situations like this, and it's not until somebody passes away that you hear all these stories about them, and you'd wish you'd sort of known them earlier and be able to talk to them about it. But to the same extent, Gray was one of those very humble people who'd be like, oh, that was nothing or whatever, or oh, it's terrible. I'm sure we've all been through it in our own personal lives. You have a family member or a friend that passes away, and then you sort of you hear about all of their history and their background, and there's half the stuff that you never knew. And Gray was the same. His history in the sport was relatively successful in the grand scheme of things, and you wouldn't know it. There was no pretentiousness about him. He was just one of the boys, and he'd help anybody in whatever way he could.
Yeah, he didn't flaunt it at all.
No. And it's like, dude, he should have known that because we could have talked about it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So I again, like I said, this one hurt. Gray, we miss you. We love you. Your brother Mike, your family, your son, your daughter, and your two beautiful grandchildren. I know you guys are hurting. So, but we are thinking about you. And Gray, we love you, man. So,
yep.
Yeah. So before I get too verklempt, let's move on. Let's move on and talk about Charlotte, because I know if Gray was right here, he'd want to talk about that Charlotte race. Because
sure.
man, what a crazy race, Louise. You get a chance to watch all this nonsense.
Primarily the tail end of Xfinity and all through the Cup race. So real quick on the Xfinity side of things, AJ Allmendinger rules on the Roval once more. Brandon Brown, who won at Talladega, got turned and decided to finish backwards. Pretty much how I try to, rather than keep the car straight backwards, kind of what you saw with Brandon Brown coming backwards, swerving left and right. That's kind of how I am when it comes to a parking lot. Not ideal, but if
it works,
got the job. Yeah, it got the job done. And a tip of the cap to Sam Mayer, who finally had luck on his side, albeit not the result he wanted, because he missed the chicane, so he gave up what should have been a top 5 race, top 3, to finish, to barely hang on to the top 10. Sage Karam also was on the verge of a top 10. He got problems towards on the last lap as well. Ty Gibbs was towards the front, but he got turned by Mayer. So a lot of top 5, top 10 runs that should have been didn't happen. Whereas Allmendinger puts himself into the playoffs. Guys, Harrison Burden, who won multiple times last year, is going to go to Cup next year, made it through the round of 8, while Jeb did not. And Jeb will not be back with Colleague Racing, in large part nutrition, agriculture being out of the sport. He doesn't have a ride for 2022. So once again, Jeb is on the outside looking in. Unlike Matt DiBenedetto, at least Burden has a win in his stock, which was the case this year at a Talladega, which was rain shortened, which ironically both Talladega races were shortened due to weather, with Jeb winning the spring one that ended due to heavy torrential downpour, and Brandon Brown won it via darkness because of the race time being late, and also the 2 red flags that involved. Speaking involved Allmendinger and Mayer. So Allmendinger had a great bounce back from a disastrous Talladega to get to the next round. So it'd be curious to see how Allmendinger, Cindric, and those guys fare, especially Harrison Burton, going forward. And under news in Xfinity, Michael Andretti is going to no longer be a full-time driver next season. I mean, I kind of expected that to be because of his injuries, how he was going to attempt to run Indianapolis, then he put somebody else in the car. And then on top of that, Josh Berry was able to win in Michael's car at Las Vegas. So I think the writing on the wall was there. And I think Michael said it best with Bob Parker's or in the media scrum. I think it was directly to Bob that a lot has changed to where he wants to kind of his viewpoint in life has changed to where he just want to scale back a bit. And Michael only has that one win at Daytona in 2019, but he's kind of like not the worst driver out there. He's been pretty decent, but I feel like there's been a couple things that kind of hurt his career. Obviously, one, this injury at Daytona many years ago certainly set him back a ton. Then obviously going to Cup for a couple years where it kind of led him to nowhere. He's one of very few drivers to have 100 Cup starts without a top 10. So be curious to see how many more races will Annette plan to drive. I'd imagine he'll drive Phoenix since that's going to be the last one as a full-time driver, but we'll see how he goes about things.
Yeah, but you got to really look at AJ Allmendinger as a serious contender.
Oh, he's been a contender all year
for this Xfinity title. And here's a guy who's got a really mixed career of successes across the board in different series. But this is, one of the first time he's really putting his stamp on a season. And I think Austin Cindric should be sweating bullets, to not repeat as champion. I think Allmendinger looks good week in and week out. So
as long as he doesn't have a mulligan going forward, Allmendinger or Cindric for the championship battle, I think that's going to be the big thing. Because I don't see anybody else outside of that really showing a threat, aside from Justin Allgaier. He's the only other one I can see that could crash this party of Allmendinger and Cindric.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but even then, that's a long shot. But let's talk about the Cup race.
Yeah.
Because the Cup race was high drama, largely thanks to the little rivalry, or maybe it's a large rivalry between.
It's kind of become the biggest rivalry that has actually had leverage, rather than this is all one-off incident or two-off.
I think this one is, it goes beyond Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano or Dale Earnhardt and Darrell Waltrip. This is, straight up. We're talking about Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick, and Harvick, for his point, he literally dumped Chase Elliott, put him in the wall, thinking if I get Chase out of the race, that's going to guarantee me a spot in the playoffs. It doesn't quite take Chase out of the race. But Chase,
Kyle Larson was also on the outside looking in for a good bit too.
Yeah. But then, and if you listen to radio transmissions, Chase gets back in the race. They fixed that bumper that was falling off. And then he says, all we got to do is wreck Harvick, and then that locks us in. Of course, he doesn't even make it up to Harvick before Harvick feels the pressure and puts himself in the wall, knocks himself out. It's like Hollywood can't write a better script for a comedy.
No, this whole thing has just been pure comedy from everything. I know Rick Hendrick wants this to end with all of that. I mean, who better than he went through it with Bodine and Earnhardt in the late 80s. I think that's kind of what he's deja vu, what he's seen from Harvick and Elliott. It's kind of what he endured when Bodine and Earnhardt wouldn't stop wrecking each other for a number of years. And I get it, but
I'm old enough to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I get where he's coming from. It's like the only way it's going to stop is between them or NASCAR does step in. Chase Elliott pretty much said it like happy holidays. No, what was it? A merry holiday season and a happy Christmas. And lo and behold, I said this, I even tweeted about it in the back of my mind. If Elliott makes it in with that wrecked bucket in a similar way like Kyle Larson did a couple years ago, watch them make a shirt out of it. Lo and behold, they did make a shirt, but not from the wrecked car, but from his comment to Harvick. So at the end of the day, they're making money out of this rivalry. Well, Elliott's camp, because whoever's running the Elliott marketing stuff gets it from that perspective. I think it's gonna really put Harvick in an uptight scenario to where maybe Harvick will probably. Well, Elliott didn't took out Harvick. Harvick took himself out.
Harvick took himself out before Chase could get to him. Yeah. But here's the thing, right? So Harvick now out of the chase has nothing to lose.
Yeah, and it's the first time he's not ever.
Exactly. So now you've got to wonder: is this another? If you recall, a couple of years ago, when Matt Kenseth, with nothing to lose, took out Joey Logano with everything to lose, very intentionally, took the penalty and said, "Okay, yeah, did what I did." I don't know if Harvick has that in him, but
maybe,
you know what I mean. So
unless Harvick blocks out
riled up,
Elliott,
yeah.
Unless Harvick blocks out the Elliott comment, just no sells it, then I think it's gonna fizzle out. But if he took it personally, who knows? I don't know him not well at all. Then maybe it may not be over, but we'll see. If it comes out to Elliott and Harvick for the win, I'm pretty sure that's when it's gonna really escalate big time. Just watch. That's only if Harvick's in position to win. But as you mentioned,
and that's
that's
the unfathomable thing right now, that Harvick, who won 9 races last year, is winless going into the round of 8. That man has not seen a checkered flag this year.
I think this reminds me of like Jeff Gordon in 08 having 6 or 7 wins in 07, 30 top 10s, and Gordon just could not find a way to win at all. 08 was genuinely his worst season in my book, not 2010, because 2010 he should have won 5 or 6 times, but just couldn't get it done due to just ridiculous circumstances. But the point is, he's definitely had the championship contention hangover horrendously. Hamlin, yeah, he didn't win, but at least Hamlin has been up there with Larson as far as race finishes, strong results, race in and race out. Now he's just have wins to his table to back it up. Harvick has not been able to do that at all this year.
Yeah, and Hamlin is looking like a championship favorite right now. He's after having a very consistent but winless regular season, he's peaking at the right time. As are the Penske, all 3 Penske guys are in the round of 8, right? Which is my surprise at this playoffs, how the Penske made it this far. Because, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I just did not have confidence on Keselowski or Logano making it far compared to Blaney. And now all 3 of them are in the round of 8. Yeah. So now, Richard, you've been quiet over there. I have to say that once per show. So
exactly.
So the Charlotte Roval as a track, okay? It certainly delivers a good show. But but is it pure racing? I mean, it's you and I grew up watching guys drive on road courses to perfection, right? And try to the driving itself is very sloppy at the Roval. It's very sloppy. Guys are going way over the track limits, and knocking one another out. But I think I feel like it's more of a more of an entertainment value than pure road racing. But at the end of the day, it is fun to watch.
It is. And I think what you have to realize is you're to a certain extent, you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with these cars. Fundamentally, these cars are not designed at their core for road racing. They're designed for oval race. They're designed for ovals. So you are compromising massively with vehicle performance and vehicle dynamics and vehicle setup to make it work. So you're always going to be compromised. So there are always going to be limitations into what the drivers can do. However, it's getting better. You've got to give them credit. A lot of the guys that you would consider a hopeless at road racing have, in the last 3 or 4 years, have massively stepped up and have been semi-competitive. And you look at So I think Monday, Tuesday, they were actually testing the next gen car at the Roval, and they actually put some lap times out, and they were like 5 seconds a lap faster. Some of them. I think Denny Hamlin did one lap where he must have missed a chicane off because he was like 4 seconds faster than anybody else. But I think on the whole, yeah, I think there's a lot more speed in those new cars, and that will come from the suspension geometry and the configuration of those. You know, you go to fully independent suspension, and the car's more evenly balanced. You don't have this big left side weight bias like you do on a conventional Cup car at the moment. So I think next year it will be better. Yeah, they could probably do a few things to tighten up some of the driving standards, should we say. You know, these are big, heavy cars, and if they can bounce a curb, they will bounce a curb. You know, a little sausage curb in there isn't going to swell. They did it in Indianapolis, didn't they? It's wrecked half the field. But yeah, put a few of those curbs from turn 6 at Indianapolis around the Roval, and you'd be sorted.
Yeah,
just ask Joey Logano.
I mean, for me, the interesting thing when we get to these, you know, infield road courses on ovals like Indianapolis or like Charlotte is that the cars never spread out. Yeah, you know, you see a Formula One race or an IndyCar race, the cars will spread out. The NASCAR cars stay bunched, and
that's purely due to the aerodynamic.
Exactly, but the amount of guys who said, "Oh, the 29 spun me, the 48 spun me," it's just because they're so evenly matched. But again, to your point, the next car, the Gen 7 car, is built more like an IMSA car. With like you said, the independent suspension, and it's more proper. It's a more proper race car. I mean, that'll offend some, you know, NASCAR purists to say this is a proper race car, but I feel like we might see a little bit of that, spreading out of the field.
I'll say this though.
Yeah.
Real quick, I know if I remember, they were working close with Action Express, which is the Wheeling IMSA team that are fighting for a championship right now, as well with Felipe Nasser and Pipo Derani. Yeah. And what I know about how I looked at the car more than ever, I did notice it's kind of like a blend in of the look of a Gen 6, but also kind of how the 90s stock car looked. A little bit how curvy it is on the side, on the front and rear bumpers. They kind of gave me that late 90s vibe quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they keep going to try to, you know, match them as much as possible with the commercially available vehicle that they're supposed to replicate, obviously.
I mean, the Truck Series are kind of doing that next year. Now they kind of look like their counterparts, except Toyota's just doesn't look aesthetically pleasing to the eye. The Ford, no, I think that's the Ford that I don't remember. It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, I know that. I know there's got a few changes in there, but there's got to be areas where the teams can differentiate themselves and the manufacturers can differentiate themselves. But I also think it's a generational thing as well. I think as long as NASCAR keeps up with this road course calendar in terms of having 5 or 6 road courses in the season, rather than the 2 they had for a long period of time. As we get into the next generation of driver talent and driver pool that will through natural progression, I think you're going to see better racing, because these guys that are coming through will, you know, have to be very, very skillful road course racers. And it may also encourage more kids that learn on the road courses to go into, you know, the Truck Series and Xfinity and NASCAR, rather than just purely the kids that do like the midgets and the quarter mile stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens and how that progresses. But
see,
I think we're in this balance at the moment.
That's a very interesting topic to bring up, because you know, the reason why guys that do quarter midgets and dirt track and USAC don't get into Indy cars because the training is not proper. you're better off to do like Skip Barber, SCCA, Lucas Oil, and then get in the Road to Indy program. But if NASCAR is going to go to a more road course heavy schedule, does that mean that we're going to have another major race series that shuts out the USAC dirt guys and the USAC pavement guys? Yeah, you know what I mean?
I don't think so.
And I'm not saying next year. I'm saying 5, 6, 7
years. Yeah.
5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road. Is that where we're heading?
I mean, in all fairness,
we've been talking about
you could flip that. You can flip that. And who won last week at the Roval?
Well, we haven't talked about that big.
In the cup
that's right.
But what I'm saying is, what's his background?
Oh, yeah, it's straight up USAC dirt. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. So,
that's kind of how
if you
people
have
first heard
a
of him
guy
a decade ago.
Yeah, if you have a guy with pure talent, they will adapt and they will grow. You look at Jimmy Johnson. From my understanding, Jimmy Johnson started out, in driving, and I think Jeff Gordon was the same. They both started out driving single seater sort of series, or more road course.
I want to say
Jimmy Johnson was off road.
Yeah, Jimmy Johnson was driving off road trucks. And
so,
Jeff Gordon was USAC single seaters.
So look, they did okay for themselves in tin tops, didn't they?
Yeah, I think the big thing is like now it's going to be. We talked about how the USAC drivers going to IndyCar has been tough for 50 plus years. I know Robin Miller, God bless his soul, was the main guy, kind of reminding us all that it's just tough for these USAC guys to really get into IndyCar. To where, like, I know DeHardy and I briefly discussed about it back in the month of May. If a Cody Swanson wants to make it to the Indianapolis 500, he probably has to go through the road at Indy. The same with Ernie Francis Jr. Like, he's super successful Trans Am champion. Looks like he's going to get an Indy Lights test out of it. Looks like that's where he might end up, open wheels rather than the stock car route.
Frank, do you want to mention Austin Cindric now?
Yeah.
Austin Cindric has made the comment that his road to the Indy 500 goes through NASCAR. Yeah, which makes no sense. But hey,
it's an in-joke on this show.
Well, but now,
I mean, he's going to Cup for Penske.
I was gonna say now that you got Jimmy Johnson there, why not? You know what I mean? Jimmy Johnson's road to the Indy 500 went through Cup, but
in all fairness, Austin Cindric's road to the Indy 500 is probably through his dad's. His dad's phone number rather than anything else.
Certainly, yep.
Compared to where he was 3 years ago, he's got it together. He's the one that's he's got it together. We'll see how he does in the top level though, and that's the thing that whenever Ty Gibbs goes to Cup, maybe in a couple years, we'll see because Ty did not start it too good until last year, late 2019, in this past year alone.
Oh, he's been impressive. He's been incredibly impressive. Yeah,
and everybody they view him as the top young talent over Sam Mayer. The Mayer, I view him more high regard because he doesn't really come from like, don't quote me on that because I can't remember exactly, but he comes from a different background. And the same thing I view with Jesse Love, who's going for a second ARCA West championship. He does some of the dirt in the short track. So be curious to see in the coming years where he goes. Does he want to be a successful dirt racer, or he wants to try to be a successful stock car driver?
So who won the Roval?
You mentioned it now. I know Kyle Larson.
Kyle Larson won the Roval, okay?
Yeah,
there we go.
There you go.
Joey
getting off topic.
So let's, guys.
Joey Head did not finish 8th. Unfortunately, he got taken out on somebody else's mess that Truex got so mad about.
Well, I mean, Louise, that was the craziest prediction ever for you to decide who's going to finish 8th. So, but let's. Where are we off to next?
We're off to Texas.
Texas, okay.
So find out who's going to be our first man going to the championship for.
All right, so our eliminated drivers are
Kevin Harvick,
William
Byron, Alex Bowman, Christopher Bell.
Right. All the drivers that name that starts with the last name starts with a B and Harvick. Same guys that they were above the cut. They were below the cut last week. So now we're down to we've got
four races to go
right
in this season, including the championship finale at Phoenix. We just have 3 more races to decide who's going to be battling for the title at Phoenix. Same goes for Xfinity. Truck Series just has Martinsville to decide the championship for lineup.
Right. And we have left in the thing, we've got all 3 Penske cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
3 out of 4 Gibbs cars.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 Hendrick cars.
That is correct, which is pretty much on the Hendrick. It's pretty much built up aside from pretty much the drivers that have been the most consistent all season long are in this battle now.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, as it is. So, who do you like for Texas?
I mean, look no further than Kyle Larson, but since Keselowski is still in this, and I know the road courses were not kind to him. I know he got knocked around multiple times at the Roval as well. I think he'll make the I think he pulls the upset. I think Keselowski could get it done and punch himself into the championship 4. I think he can do it. Remember, I look back to the All-Star race a little bit to see if there's a way to how they do. The difference is there'll be no PJ1 at Texas. It's going to be all resin. I think that's what they did in Nashville. And which I think could favor an outsiders like the Ganassis of Kurt Busch and Ross Chastain. But other than Keselowski, I think you'd look no further than Kyle Larson probably being the first man punching his ticket to the championship 4. And
so are you picking Larson or Keselowski? This was a really simple question, and you're overcomplicating it.
As always.
Wanted
to bring I wanted to bring up Keselowski real quick, but I think at the end of the day, look no further than Larson probably getting it done.
All right. If you're gonna pick Larson, I'll pick Keselowski. Richard, who do you like?
Oh, I mean, I think it's hard to look past Larson, isn't it? I hate to steal your pick there, but yeah, double up on that one.
Oh, so you can double up on Larson. All right, so
I think so. Yeah, it's hard not to. I think he's just got that little bit extra.
He does, yeah. He has all year. All right, so Formula One was in Turkey.
They were indeed.
Valtteri Bottas got his first win of the season.
You did indeed.
Yep. So let's go over Turkey real quick, and then after that, let's talk about this story that involves Alfa Romeo, Colton Herta, and Michael Andretti.
Yeah. So back in Turkey again. Again, Turkey's one of those tracks we've talked about that sort of really benefited from the global crisis we've had in the last 18 months or so. And again, it put on a pretty good show. They resurfaced the track from last year when it was like trying to watch Bambi on ice, with those guys spinning all over the place last year in that on that crazy surface. Drier this year through Friday and Saturday, but then Sunday it was this sort of weird weather. Really, it was sort of raining a little bit, but it was pretty cold out there. It was never really warm enough for the rain to lift, and so everybody was pretty much on medium tires for the whole race. I think Seb Vettel did like one lap on slick tires, and he spanned that many times. I think distance wise, he probably drove 2 laps. But he was the only guy that had been on slick tires in the 2020 and 2021 Turkish Grand Prix, and he managed 1 lap from. But no, I think given the fact that they knew or they had a pretty good odds it was going to be a wet race, Mercedes took the decision to replace the internal combustion engine on Lewis's car, which would give him a 10-place grid penalty, as opposed to Max Verstappen, who had the back of the grid start in Russia because they replaced every component in the engine. So the MGUK, the internal combustion engine, the hybrid system, all of those things were replaced on the Red Bull. Mercedes, they just replaced their internal combustion engine. So although Hamilton put a fantastic lap together, he ended up starting the race back in 11th, and Valtteri inherited the pole from Max, who was second. And throughout the race, really, Yeah, it was intermediate tyres for the whole race. Valtteri sort of held that position off the lead and drove a fantastic race and dominated the race, really. Anytime Verstappen or somebody could get close, he managed to extend the gap, and they played the pit stop strategy perfectly. And yeah, it was pretty much a very nondescript, no drama race with Valtteri there. Behind, you had some guys were thinking, can we do the full race on one set of inters? And there's obviously the big fallout from the public disagreement, should we say, between Lewis and his team on the radio, where Lewis wanted to stay out when he was running third, I think. And he pitted, which dropped him back to fifth, which is where he stayed. So he was sort of questioning, have they lost some points there? Because if he had finished third, I think he would have maintained the lead in the championship. Whereas now, with Max coming second and Lewis finishing down in fifth, Max has retaken the lead in the championship.
Now, weren't Lewis's tires starting to show?
Oh yeah,
the canvas.
Now,
yeah,
well, I don't think they were showing the canvas, but they were bald and they were blistering, which is where the surface actually starts to boil. And because these tires are not designed to be run on a dry track, and although it wasn't perfectly dry, there was a dry line starting to appear on certain areas of the track, and that's why you typically see, like on the front and back straights, when they're in this sort of crossover phase, it'll start to cool the tires down because they will start to blister and fail. Now, I think Esteban Ocon actually did manage to run the whole race on one set of tires, but I think he struggled in the last 5 or so laps and did lose a number of places. So I think it was probably justified making that call to pit, considering what could have happened. And we only have to look back to China in 2007 when Lewis was in a very, very similar position in his first season in Formula One with a chance to win the championship, and didn't pit on tyres that were worn and actually crashed entering the pit lane because his tyres were literally down to the canvas in that situation. So I think that obviously Mercedes have a huge amount of data available to them when they make these strategy calls. The only thing they don't have is the driver feedback and the driver's sensation and feel and that sort of stuff. So it's who do you believe? And I think in the situations like that, yeah, Lewis is never going to want to pit. He's always going to want to try and stay and achieve maximum points. But on the flip side, the team are the one that who had the ability to make the calm, calculated decision. Yeah, it did cost them leading the championship, but given the alternative, where he had maybe spun out, or maybe he did have a complete tyre failure and didn't score any points, it was the sensible, logical, boring decision to make, should we say.
Fair enough. So we've got Max has a 4 or 5 point lead right now.
We've got 2 or 3 point lead, very close anyway.
Yeah, so yeah,
I think it's 4 probably.
Yeah, but if somebody wins a race, if Lewis wins a race, he'll go back ahead of Max. They're not close enough that Max can be like, oh well, we're a long way off. Who needs to finish where? But one of the things that did come out of this weekend is that Red Bull are not questioning, should we say, but certainly making noises around the Mercedes engine performance coming out of the last couple of races anyway. Definitely, in Russia, given the weather conditions and like that, Mercedes engine did look very, very strong. And again, during the practice sessions in Turkey, when the running was dry, the Mercedes engine did look very, very strong. Now, there are certain things that, all these engines the designs are homogenized. So in theory, you can't bring out an engine upgrade mid-season, but there are certain things they can do to the engines in the name of reliability. And I think a bit like the aerodynamics they had going into this season, there's a token system where they can make some changes, which is why you've seen Ferrari replace Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz's engines in the last couple of weeks. So there is some performance improvements coming there, but Mercedes certainly appeared to have stepped up their game in the last 2 or 3 races there. So it's going to be interesting to see how that battle continues through Austin in a couple of weeks and the rest of the season.
Certainly, yeah. So we are off to Austin. Some of the stuff has arrived via plane. So we got another week off before we run that race in Texas. So we'll have to see how that plays out, and we can talk about that a little more next week. But before we finish up, speaking of Formula One in the United States, the story of Michael Andretti buying out the Sauber team, whether it be a minority or a majority share, is grown some real legs with the media. And this started out as just a couple of tweets here and there, but now like every major news outlet has picked this up, and they're pegging Colton Herta to be that, take that seat next to Bottas at Alfa Romeo. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, Michael has expressed interest in buying a Formula One team. Yes, he has began a company to acquire capital. Yes, he has a bunch of backing from Gainbridge, who was a very cash-rich company. But nothing beyond that is decided. Nothing has been stated publicly from Andretti other than, if the right opportunity come around, we jump at it. And as far as Colton Herta's been concerned, he's been pretty quiet himself. But I mean, you guys think this story has real legs, or is it just some IndyCar off season? Let's try to get some clicks on our website.
Well, I think it's a double barrel story. I think the two issues are, the Andretti investing in a Formula One team and the Colton Herta story. So if you take them separately, I think you look at Michael Andretti's portfolio in racing, and the one thing he doesn't have is a Formula One team. He's certainly building an automotive and motor racing empire, with the brand and the name going forward. So it's a logical next step. However, the budget to run a Formula One team is probably 5 times combined all of his other motorsport activities. So it's nothing to be sniffed at. You need to have the financial backing to do that, and not the financial backing for a year, but the financial backing for 5 or 10 years. Just ask Gene Haas, on that level. You don't make much money out of these deals, really, in reality, in the grand scheme of things. As the team, the sponsors are the ones that make the money from the exposure standpoint. Now, if you look at the deal, it would probably be just we're going to take over the running of the team, and they will stay based in Switzerland, that they won't have any US, maybe some marketing and PR stuff on the similar signs that what Haas F1 has, but it would be very, very, very limited. There won't be any technical aspect based out of the US because there's no need. I mean, Alpha haven't exactly been knocking on the door of regular point scoring, for the last few years, unfortunately. But they have a fantastic facility there. They have some great engineering staff, and you'd like to think that if somebody does come in and buy a majority holding in the company, then they'll bring a budget to help improve and invest in those facilities. The second side of the argument is obviously this Colton Herta scenario, and we've discussed it, and I've been relatively vocal on the show at times. The kid makes too many mistakes. He makes too many mistakes even for IndyCar. And there's one thing, you look at a Formula One driver, the number of the mistakes they make, and if you are a top Formula One driver, you can count the number of mistakes they make in a season on one hand. You can count, in all fairness, the number of mistakes Colton Herta has made in a weekend on one hand sometimes. And that's just, he's young and he's inexperienced, he's learning. But unfortunately, in Formula One, that's no excuse. You had guys like, Max Verstappen coming in at 17 and not making mistakes. And Colton's 21, 22 now? So
21.
So I mean, if he actually joined the grid Say he joined the grid in 2023. Let's take 2022 out of the question. Say he joined it in 2023. So he'd be 22, 23. That's old by an F1 rookie standard these days. Yeah, he'll have a few years in IndyCar under his belt. But unless the only way he will do it is if I'll be blunt, if he wins the championship next year and wins it comfortably. I think the kid has the raw speed, as we saw at, some of those races towards the end of the season. Mind you, he was out of the championship battle, but he is damn quick. And I mean, it was Laguna Seca, wasn't it? He dominated that race. Nobody got even close to him. And that's the level he has to be at week in, week out. If he can go there, there's no reason in IndyCar next year he can't win 7 or 8 races in the calendar at least, purely on his raw natural talent. And he has to do that. If he doesn't do that, and I mentioned this in one of our group chats, he has a fantastic benchmark next season at Andretti in Roman Grosjean. Grosjean is a good, solid F1 driver. He would still do a decent job for most of the teams out there. The reason he left Haas is because the money situation, and he didn't have that X factor name or branding or financial backing. He could still do a job and be as quick as anybody out there on the Formula 1 grid. So if Herta comes along and comfortably beats Grosjean on a regular basis next year, then again, that'll make people sit up and take note. If he struggles against Grosjean, I think it'll seriously question his future. And there's been some articles out there, would he be better off sticking in IndyCar if he's not in that position to do so?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think that the Andretti buying into Sauber or / Alfa Romeo has some legs. I think the Colton Herta as a driver is something completely dreamed up by racing journalists. But that's just me. But speaking of things completely dreamed up, let me throw this out here that I dreamed up. How there's been some rumors about the Volkswagen Audi Porsche group being interested in maybe getting back into Formula One. Well, Michael,
McLaren? Rumors about Audi buying McLaren.
Yes. Okay. So no, hear me out here.
No, not that one. Sorry.
no, not that. No, this is something I'm making up on my own. I'm gonna start my own rumor. Okay. So, but Michael runs Volkswagen in his World Rally team. There's a couple of rumors that Volkswagen Porsche Audi group want to get into Formula One. Michael, realistically, like you said, need a whole lot more budget, like maybe a manufacturer to step behind him. Could you see that?
I think it would have
Volkswagen
to be
AG, Michael Andretti Racing in Formula One. I don't know.
Yeah,
I just made it
something.
up.
Well,
something.
You need something. And again, with these new engine rules coming in 2026, maybe that is part of the discussion. Andretti's looking at this as, okay, I can get myself in now, become established, create that foundation, and then somebody comes along in 3 or 4 years with an engine partnership and an engine backing,
right? And attract and then be the de facto factory team.
Yeah. Although that Ferrari link with the Hinwell based team, apart from those few years when it was BMW Sauber, do run pretty deep there.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how all that pans out. But anyway,
briefly on the Herta thing, as you mentioned, 2022 is going to be big for Colton to really deliver, especially with those super license. To where if he really wants to go to F1 in 2023, he's going to have a championship year. And I know he's capable of doing that, but he's got to eliminate those inconsistencies and those mistakes that he made since his rookie year, honestly, in 2019, where when he's on it, he's really on it. And when he's not, he's just there. And you cannot have both if you're going to be in the mix. In IndyCar, you got to have pretty much almost a really good season from start to finish. You cannot flounder or have a mulligan. I look further with Sebastian Bourdais. Like for a couple of years, he started off the year winning St. P. Things looked good, and then one incident that knocked him out of the championship trail for the rest of the year and never recovered. Graham Rahal's another example. Will Power. Their difference is Will Power has fight for wins on a regular basis than Graham, but one mulligan, one bad luck, boom, out of contention. Even Dixon, only one win this past season. Just could not. He was still having those Dixon runs, but not as strong as he was. And then Laguna happened, and just never. And then, of course, the crash at Gateway didn't do him any wonders at all. So you just got to be on it from start to finish as best as possible. You could kind of get away with one DNF, but that one DNF better be made up really, really well. Because
you better hope your other competitors DNF as well. But before we sign off for the night, we only got about 5 minutes left. I do want to mention the speaking of IndyCar, the story of Jack Harvey, who in the worst kept secret ever. Jack Harvey was announced as the driver for Rahal Lanigan, but not in the 30 car as we all expected. He was announced as the 45 car, which is the Hy-Vee car, which is very interesting because Hy-Vee had stated quite publicly they wanted an American driver in that car. Jack Harvey, who has despite having a very nondescript, could be American name like Ed Jones, Jack Harvey is a product of the UK. So that leaves the 30 car up for speculation. Or it also makes you wonder, has everything fallen through for Rahal to really expand to 3 cars? I mean, will there be no 30 car?
Or that 30 car becomes the all-star lineup. I've heard somebody said maybe this Christian Lundgaard takes the 30. I don't know how much leverage is in that one.
That's the hot rumor, is that Lundgaard takes that. And Lundgaard has some funding. Mm-hmm. And it's odd because you would imagine that Lundgaard would take the 30 because Hy-Vee wanted an American guy in the 45. But I mean, what did we do? Did we pass off Jack Harvey as an American? Oh, Jack Harvey's American. There you go, Hy-Vee. So.
But yeah,
But Lundgaard's got some. There's some legs to that story, but it's wild that when they announced it, everyone thought Jack Harvey was going to the 30, and the 45 was going to go to perhaps Santino or maybe Oliver Askew or perhaps Lundgaard.
I hope for all we know it could have been Hunter Rafe, but that's not likely now.
Hey. That they could have put Graham Rahal on a 45, give Hy-Vee their American guy. And
true,
they could have moved that around, but
move
things around. But I would seriously love to see Rahal running 3 cars full time, and I hope that still happens.
I think that's the plan, and I think that's been the plan for a while. I was just curious who they put in that car. What I do know is that you mentioned it. Well, yeah, you could put Graham in the 45, but still be the 15 teams, just kind of like with Hendrick with the number switch. The origin is still with X. What? Oh, here we go again. I'm not going to go into that whole Hendrick ancestral thing, but I'll leave that on hold. But you get the point.
No, I get the point. But at the end of the day, Jack Harvey is been announced for Hy-Vee. Photographed in the Hy-Vee colors and everything. So Hy-Vee is evidently pretty good with Jack Harvey.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they be? I think Jack Harvey has the potential to win some races if he, gets a better race strategist than he had with Michael Shank.
That's the thing. The race craft needs to work. Qualifying is on it. We don't have to question it.
Yeah, we know the guy can drive. It just, it's like Michael Shank Racing decides to say, well, let's take a pretty good strategy and instead substitute something that gives us a 1% chance of winning, and we've seen it time and time again where they go off strategy. We saw with Elliott where he could have won, the season ender. at Long Beach.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we are out of time. So we've already made our picks for Texas. The Formula One race in Texas, we can make our picks next week. So I'll give you guys a moment for a final thought apiece.
At the end of the day, this whole thing of go back to Kyle Larson, the fact that at one point he was outside looking in because he was dealing with alternator and battery issues and all of that stuff. The fact he was able to rally back to win, it kind of shows you where that 5 team is all together. They rally. They dealt with the adversity super well, and they got the job done. And that is going to be lethal when it matters most come this round and in the finale of Phoenix.
All right, Richard, you got a few moments for a final thought of your own.
Final thought. It's ages since we've done a final thought. I've forgotten what they are.
I know. It's been ages since we finished up before the deadline. So
exactly, we're down on the number of series, aren't we? But what have we got coming up? We don't really talk about British Touring Car final coming up in a couple of weeks in the UK at Brands Hatch. That's always good watch. You can find some of those highlights on YouTube. Some pretty exciting racing there. DTM final last weekend in Germany was a absolute screw up. One guy took out the main championship contender and somebody just waltzed to the championship when it was all a bit of a mess there. Again, they're interesting highlights if you can find those on YouTube. There's some. Well, you're trying to fill the void of IndyCar. You can check those out. Always good for good fun.
Always good for good fun. All right. So, speaking of which, we are out of time. So, I want to thank you, Richard and Louise. Appreciate you guys a ton. One more time, I want to say Godspeed to you, Gray Warren. You were wonderful to me and Richard and Louise. I'm at a loss for words. So, Gray, I love you, man.
Yep.
I want to thank the Who's Radio Network. I want to thank Spreaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. But most of all, I want to thank you folks that listen to us week in and week out. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's whoozoo.com. Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.